This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
There are many mitzvahs that out of those mitzvahs, some of them require a little bit of effort, some of them require even money, some of them require time. There are some mitzvahs, however, that as we have mentioned previously, are very much like L'havdil, an amazing business investment. And that is because, as we've mentioned many times before, the definition of a good business investment is something that requires very little time, effort and money, but yet reaps the rewards. That is unbelievable. The mitzvah that we are going to be discussing today is one of those mitzvahs. The mitzvah that I'd like to discuss today is a mitzvah that we're all familiar with. It's a mitzvah that we all know of. It's a mitzvah that we're all mekayim. We all keep the mitzvah. But sometimes we don't fully appreciate the value of the mitzvah. Sometimes we don't fully appreciate what this mitzvah can do for us, like the famous mashal, as we all know, of a fellow in the forest. And he's walking deep, deep into the forest, doesn't know from anything. He's a poor farmer. All he knows is from cucumbers and tomatoes. And all of a sudden he sees in the middle of this forest, he sees these most beautiful diamonds. Now he has no idea what these diamonds are and how much they're worth, but he just figures out these must be good. And he starts filling his whole backpack with all these diamonds. He has no idea what he's going to do with them, but these look good, take them back for the kids as souvenirs. Until he gets further and further in, and it's heavier and heavier in his back. And he says, I've got to get rid of these stones, they're just weighing me down. It's just too heavy, it's too difficult, it's annoying. Remember those words. And he one by one tips out his backpack, and eventually is left with no stones anymore. Forget, his kids will have to forgive him not to bring back any souvenirs. And he reaches an inn. After days and days of walking in the forest, he reaches the inn and he says, innkeeper, please, give me a place to stay, give me something to eat, give me some food, I'm starving. So the guy says, sure, give me some money. Money? I don't need money. What do you think I am? I've just been, touring the forest and I got lost. I've got no money. Well, I'm sorry. Doesn't work that way over here. It's not free. Can you give me some money? He says, I don't have any money. Empty your pockets. She starts to empty his pockets. Nothing. Empty your bag. Empty his bag. Nothing. All of a sudden, at the corner, got cracked, got sort of kept, sort of stuck in the middle over there. Tipped out one of these very small little stones that obviously didn't make it out when he tipped out the rest of his bag. And the guy says, wow, where'd you get this from? He said, what do you mean? A whole bag full of them. Right? It was just too heavy for me. It was annoying. It was a bother for me to carry them. So I just said, get rid of them. He said, are you crazy? Where'd you find these things for? It's worth so much. This will support you for a whole year. The guy was overjoyed when he heard that. It was unbelievable. But then he was upset. Because look what I had. And I missed it. And the mitzvah today, Be'ez Hashem, in the next few moments, is a mitzvah that, again, we're all familiar with and we all keep this mitzvah. But it's a mitzvah that we're now going to fully understand and appreciate the value of this mitzvah. And that mitzvah is the mitzvah of tzitzis. There's a ponim yofis, the haflah. The haflah writes in Parashat Shalach Lecha, why is it that it took until the Parashat of Shalach Lecha to mention the mitzvah of tzitzis? Shouldn't it have been given at Har Sinai? What a wonderful mitzvah. And he writes that the reason is because there's no chiyuv, as we know, there's no obligation to wear tzitzis. It's what we call an eitzah tova, as we'll see Be'ez Hashem what that means. It's a wonderful thing that a person should do. But it's not a chiyuv. And therefore the Torah didn't mention it at Har Sinai. The Ksava Kabbalah writes that, and our clothing reminds us who we are and who we're close to. And wearing tzitzis is that item that puts us close to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Because we wear tzitzis, and we'll see Be'ez Hashem where this comes from. When a person wears tzitzis, it reminds him Tomid of Hashem, says the Ksava Kabbalah. Says the Chinuch Mitzvah Shimpei Vav, that when a person wears tzitzis, he's constantly reminded of the Rebbeinu Shalom. He's got this reminder on his guf, on his body at all times, wherever he goes, whatever he does, of the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Medrash brings down that one of the reasons for tzitzis is to be mavdil us, is to separate us from the goyim. The goyim also wear clothes, we also wear clothes. We might wear different color clothes, different types of clothes, different fashions, that could be, or maybe not. But one thing we do differently is tzitzis. It's one thing, says the Medrash, that gives us the differentiation between us and a goy. is the mitzvah of tzitzis. In fact, when Shinshu Rafal Hirsch writes that when Adam and Chava left Gan Eden, we know that one of the things they were given were clothes. Why? Because an item of clothing is that which separates you from an animal. A tzitzis is that what separates us from a goyin, reminds us who we are, and therefore, hopefully, to understand what we're going to be doing. Rabbi said there's an unbelievable chazal. There's a Gemara Menachas Mem Gimel Amar Aleph. Everybody knows the Gemara in the Doim Chof Hey Shvuas Chof Tes Amar Aleph Kama Mekaymis in Shas. That the Gemara tells us an unbelievable statement. Tzitzis. Rabbi said, listen carefully, because everybody here is going to be Mekayim mitzvahs of tzitzis for the rest of their life. But it's a shame not to understand the real value of the mitzvah. Says Chazal, Tzitzis shakul keneged kol ha-mitzvahs kulon. You know what that means? That means when you put on a pair of tzitzis, you're not just being Mekayim a mitzvah, not to put that down, because being Mekayim mitzvah is unbelievable. But you're actually being Mekayim all of the mitzvahs together. In the Zohar Kodesh tells us, tzitzis is the clothing of Tariag mitzvahs. This clothing affords you the wonderful schar and reward of Tariag mitzvahs. The Maharsha learns, because it's keneged kol mitzvahs, because the schar is so great, and the oynish, the punishment, is so great for not wearing tzitzis. He says the Maharsha, that's the pshat why it's keneged kol mitzvahs. And we have to think about this, because we're often confronted with situations where it's difficult for us to wear tzitzis. It's a bother for us to wear tzitzis. We can't be bothered. It's too hot outside. We're playing sports. All the heterim, and again, I'm not going into the heterim. It's not our halacha show this moment of time about when yeah and when no. But just for a moment, think to yourself, what have you got in your hands that you can be Mekayim? And then maybe you'll ask the question a little bit different. The Beis Yisrael, the Rebbe of Ger, says that through the mitzvah of tzitzis, a person can reach all of the mitzvahs, which is why Rashi learns that the parish of tzitzis is next to Mekoshish Eitzim, or we know that in the Torah tells us the person that was collecting wood on Shabbos, he was chayiv separated, he was Mchal Shabbos. Why is it next to the mitzvah of tzitzis? Because just like Shabbos is keneged kol ha-mitzvahs, so too tzitzis is keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. It's an unbelievable thing. If you look at the Sifri in Parashat Shalach Lecha, the Sifri writes, not only is it keneged kol ha-mitzvah, the Sifri writes that a person is actually mekayim kol ha-mitzvahs. You put on that simple vest, you put on that simple piece of material that has on it 4 corners and tzitzis, says the Sifri, you're right now being mekayim every mitzvah in the Torah. It's not only a Sifri, it's a kliyach, it's a pelayoyitz, it's a rokeach. Kama Rabbi say, Rishoni v'gedoli poskim. The Sifri writes, if a person is mekayim in the midst of tzitzis, ki'ilu ha'ikbil p'nei ha'shchina. A person is mekabel the p'nei ha'shchina. You're greeting the Rabbeinu Shalom. Rabbeinu B'chaya says, if you wear tzitzis, you're zoicha the tchias ha'mesim. Now, you may ask the following shaila. If it's such a great reward and it's such an unbelievable mitzvah, but you're potter, you don't even have to do it. How can there be such an unbelievable reward on something which you're not even chayiv to do? You don't have to do it. So how do we know this question? Because everybody here knows the Gemara in Sotah Yudalet, right? The Gemara in Sotah tells us Yudalet Amud Aleph. Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gemara has the kasha. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu want to come into Eretz Yisrael? Was it stam to tour the land, take pictures, eat falafel balls, tourists? It's a geshmak. Walk around with the camera, pictures by the kotel. It's very geshmak. Go to Eretz Yisrael, go to Israel, have my experience in Israel. I don't think that's what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to do. And the Gemara says kasha. The Gemara says the reason is because when Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to eat the fruits of the land, he wanted to become the mitzvahs of Eretz Yisrael. There's a Tosfos in Pesachim Daf Kuf Yudalad. The Gemara tells us, the Tosfos tells us the same thing, that also a person does not have to have a beged of 4 corners. However, a person should want to, just like Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have to be in Eretz Yisrael and Mekayim the mitzvahs, but he was desperate to get in there. He wanted to Mekayim the mitzvahs. So it's the same thing with us. Says Tosfos, it should be the same thing with us, that we want to Mekayim this wonderful, beautiful, amazing mitzvah, and through that we get such amazing schar. In fact, let me give you 5 examples of the most amazing schar of this mitzvah. Says the Medrash Tanchuma, number 1. Amazing thing. Which person over here, sitting here right now, does not want to be married and have children? Right? Without the red string, without walking 7 times around the cave like we did last week, right? We don't need to do that. Because here we have a mitzvah that says the Medrash Tanchuma automatically gives us that reward. It's an amazing thing. That's number 1. So number 1, Number 2, the Zohar Kodesh says that tefillah is niskabel. You know what that means? That means every time we daven, we would like the, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is listening to us to actually answer our davening. Says the Zohar Kodesh, this is exactly how. It's through this. Through this mitzvah of performing the mitzvah of tzitzis, says the Zohar HaKodesh, the tefillah that you offer up is automatically niskabel. Unbelievable schar. There's a shach al HaTorah, right? Sifsei Kohen. He writes that if a person is carrying the mitzvah of tzitzis, he's nidmel malochim, it's like a malach. He's wearing, like the Zohar Kodesh says, the clothing of Tariag mitzvahs. Can you imagine the reward for that? Number 4, there's a rokeach that says if a person is carrying the mitzvah of tzitzis, mechapa levisha shatnez. Be'ez Hashem will talk about wearing shatnez. It's a very, very terrible issue that people don't know much about. But if a person does, the terrible oynish that a person can have, in fact, it's brought down in the Zohar that a person who wears shatnez, his tefillahs are not answered for 40 days. It's terrible. So if you wear tzitzis, you reverse that. And the last time, as we mentioned, Rabbeinu Bachai, it's an unbelievable thing. So just think about this. Next time we have the opportunity to put on a pair of tzitzis, or maybe before we take one off, to think, wow, just a moment. Let's maybe not be so quick in taking off our tzitzis because it's sports, and because it's hot, and because of this, and yet every heter under the sun. Because, of course, you have to take it off because you're not allowed. And it's an issa. You're not allowed to wear it because you're sweating and it's on the skin and you're not allowed. And they come up with all their time in the world. We have Chazal telling us the most unbelievable rewards that a person can have over here. In fact, the Gemara tells us, a person would have 2,800 servants, connected the knots and the strings, put them all together, 2,800 servants. It's mechapa, it saves a person from Aveira. What does that mean? I had a fellow, Rabbi said, this is a true story. I'm not making this one up. I'll give you the email address of the Bocha. A Bocha in Yeshiva told me this, Mamish Lemaisa Show, he was a Russian boy. He told me he was with another Russian boy in America, New York, somewhere in Manhattan, and they were about to go to McDonald's and eat a burger, cheeseburger, unfortunately. And he told me this Maisa. I'm telling you, Rabbi Sa, I'm not lying to you. I can give you the email address. You can check it out with him. He said to me that his friend was wearing tzitzis at the time, and as they were about to go there, he looked to himself and said, I don't think I can go into McDonald's with my tzitzis out and eat a cheeseburger. Something just doesn't stim, you know what I mean? It just doesn't go together. And it saved him. It saved him. And Chazal are telling us the same thing. When a person wears tzitzis, it's a shmira. He's wearing on himself a shmira that's showing him from Allah Aveiras. That's why people wear it at night, right? Not mechuyev, but people wear it at night. They want to have that shmira. As the Gemara tells us, Kav Halacha, if you can understand that time when the Rebbeinu Shalom would get angry, we want to have tzitzis on. It's a shmira. It's a wonderful safeguard for us to make sure that we're always guarded at all times. And I'd like to end with a couple of unbelievable things. This is also a true Ma'isa. There was a young boy, 14, 15-year-old, I'm not sure exactly the age, who, Rachmana litzlan la'aleinu, we should never know of such a thing, but was diagnosed with cancer. And when he was diagnosed with cancer, it was a terrible shock to his system, to his family's system. You can imagine what it did to himself and did to his family. And eventually they got over the news and they moved forward, chemotherapy. And when he got to his very first chemotherapy session, so he got inside to the place over there, the surgery, wherever it was, where they have these machines. And they said, listen, we need to administer the first dosage of chemotherapy, whatever it was, radiation. So, one of the things is you cannot be wearing anything. You have to go in without any clothes on. Right? It's a machine, you have to lie there. I'm going to go out for a few moments, right, get undressed, and then, go into the machine, and then we'll put on the buttons of the machine and we'll figure it out. So while he's taking off his shirt, whatever, she's busy, setting up all the dials and digits over there of the machine, and she goes out while, for his privacy, and he's allowed to put on like a special robe or something, that he's allowed to put on, obviously. And she comes back a few minutes later, and she sees she's got the robe on, but there's something else there. She says, are you wearing something else? She says, yeah, I'm wearing my tzitzis. No, she says, no, you can't do that. You can't. This is very dangerous. This is because you have to take off your tzitzis. He said, I'm really sorry, I'm not taking off my tzitzis. I've never taken off my tzitzis, and I'm not taking it off now. She said, you don't understand. This is a real situation over here. You cannot leave your tzitzis on. In order for the radiation to work, I have to have your tzitzis off. You can only wear the hospital robe that is a special material that allows it to go through and whatever. He says, I'm not taking off my tzitzis. And she's getting all upset. So she calls the doctor and says, doctor, you speak to him. I can't deal with this child. So the doctor comes in, he says, listen, you have to understand, b'koach nefesh, I understand tzitzis. He was a Jew, wasn't so religious, but he didn't understand Orthodox Jew wear these tzitzis. Anyway, while he's discussing with the boy, Trumaisa, he looks at the dials on the machine, just to double check. And he goes, and his face turns white. And he calls in the nurse and he says, do you realize you administered the completely wrong dosage of radiation for this boy? If he would have gone into that machine, I'm not sure if he would have come out alive. The mitzvah of Tzitzit saved him. True Maisa, the mitzvah of Tzitzit saved him. Rabbi said, the Chofetz Chaim writes, in Parsha Shalach Lecha, how careful we have to be, that these days, said the Chofetz Chaim, is days of parnasa. We can make money, so to speak. It's our opportunity to do. And we'll end with this, the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi said, I have to tell him on the age of 3, Kol HaTorah Kula Kol, back to front, everything. And the Vilna Gaon, B'Soif Yom, over the end of his life, was crying. Right before he was nifter, he was crying. And they asked him, Vilna Gaon, why are you crying? The Tzaddik Ador, the Gadol Ador, what are you upset about? What are you worried about? You're going straight to Olam Haba, Gan Eden, everything's waiting for you. And the Vilna Gaon said, let me explain to you. Because in the next world, it's too late to Mekayim a mitzvah. Yes, you get the reward, but it's too late to do. And he said the Vilna Gaon, in this world, how easy it is. You take a penny and you put it in a stucker box. You put on a piece of material with strings on it. And you put on your body, you become mitzvahs and mitzvahs and mitzvahs. Says the Vilna Gaon, yes, I'm going up there. Who knows what's waiting for me? But you don't realize the chashivas of this world. The chashivas of doing that. The Chofetz Chaim said it's days of parnasa we can accomplish, we can get, we can do. That's what the mitzvah of tzitzis is. Next time we put on a tzitzis, next time before we take off a pair of tzitzis, let's think for a moment the wonderful schar, the wonderful reward in Be'ez Hashem. If we do this, the Rebbeinu Shalom will give us a lot of siyata d'shmaya, to give us all the brachas that Chazal tell us that we're in the midst of tzitzis. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.